On the 12th of February 1993 in Bootle, Merseyside, two 10-year-old boys, Robert Thompson and John Venables, abducted 2-year-old James Patrick Bulger after leading him away from the New Strand shopping center while he was shopping with his mother. 2 days later, James's body was discovered beside a railway line in Walton, Liverpool. The investigation that followed would become one of the most infamous child murder cases in modern British history. It began on a routine Friday afternoon inside the New Strand shopping center. At approximately 15:40, a mother briefly let go of her 2-year-old son's hand while paying for items at a butcher's counter. Seconds later, he was gone. When investigators later reviewed the shopping center's CCTV recordings, the low-resolution footage captured the moment James Patrick Bulger was led through the precinct doors by the hand. The figures walking him away were not adults. They were two 10-year-old boys, Robert Thompson and John Venables. The case shocked the country, intensified debates surrounding violent juvenile offenders, and eventually placed Thompson and Venables in an adult courtroom, where they became the youngest convicted murderers in modern English history. This is the timeline of what the cameras recorded, what witnesses reported across a 25-mile route through Liverpool, and the forensic evidence investigators later reconstructed from the railway tracks. The timeline of February 12th did not begin at 15:40. Hours before James Bulger disappeared, Robert Thompson and John Venables had already been wandering through the New Strand shopping center after skipping school. Security cameras captured the two boys moving from store to store throughout the morning. During that time, they shoplifted several items, including batteries, blue modeling clay, and a tin of blue paint. But investigators would later uncover a far darker pattern to their movements inside the shopping center. Witness statements suggested the boys had spent part of the afternoon watching younger children. Earlier that day, they had reportedly attempted to lead another toddler away from his mother. They failed. Then, shortly before 15:40, they saw James. Denise Fergus was standing at a butcher's counter when she briefly let go of her son's hand to reach into her purse and pay for her shopping. Within seconds, Thompson and Venables approached the 2-year-old. One of the boys took him by the hand. CCTV footage from the shopping center captured the moment they led James through the precinct doors and outside. There was no struggle. To anyone passing by, it appeared completely ordinary, two older boys walking with a younger child. Once outside the shopping center, the boys began leading James across Liverpool. Their route moved through residential streets toward the Leeds and Liverpool Canal before continuing in the direction of an isolated railway line in Walton. The journey happened in broad daylight. As the walk continued, James became increasingly distressed. Witnesses later recalled seeing the toddler crying and asking for his mother. Police investigators eventually determined that at least 38 people saw the three boys during the walk across the city. Some noticed James appeared upset. A small number stopped to question the older boys directly. Each time, Thompson and Venables gave the same calm explanation. They claimed James was either their younger brother or a lost child they were helping back to a police station. The explanations were accepted. Nobody intervened. The boys continued walking. The 2.5-mile walk ended at an isolated railway embankment near Walton and Anfield Station. Thompson and Venables led James away from the public streets and up onto the tracks. By that point, there were no more witnesses. What happened next was later reconstructed through forensic evidence, autopsy findings, and the boys' police interviews. Some of the first objects used in the assault were the same items the boys had shoplifted earlier that afternoon. Investigators later recovered traces of blue paint and modeling clay on James's face. The autopsy also revealed that batteries taken from the shopping center had been forced into his mouth. Then the violence escalated. Forensic examination of the embankment showed James had been kicked, stamped on, and struck repeatedly with bricks and stones taken from the railway line. During the attack, several items of his clothing, including his shoes, socks, trousers, and underpants, were removed and left near the tracks. But the most severe injuries came from a piece of railway equipment recovered at the scene. Investigators found a heavy iron railway fish plate weighing approximately 22 pounds. Evidence later showed the metal object had been lifted and dropped onto James's head. The pathologist who conducted the post-mortem examination documented 42 separate injuries. The trauma was so extensive that no single fatal blow could be identified. James died from multiple blunt force injuries. Before leaving the embankment, Thompson and Venables attempted to conceal the crime. They positioned James's body across the railway tracks and placed rubble over his head. Investigators later concluded the boys intended for a passing train to destroy evidence of the assault and make the death appear accidental. Part of the plan succeeded. Not long after the boys left the scene, a train passed along the line and struck the body. For 2 days, the embankment remained undisturbed. Then, on February 14, a group of children searching for footballs near the tracks noticed something lying beside the railway line. Police were called to the scene shortly afterward. The search for James Bulger was over. The hunt for his killers was beginning. With the crime scene secured, Merseyside police launched a large-scale homicide investigation. The most important piece of early evidence was the CCTV footage recovered from the New Strand shopping center. But the grainy images initially led detectives in the wrong direction. After studying the recordings, investigators believed the suspects were older teenagers, possibly between 14 and 15 years old. In the days following the murder, police focused much of the investigation on local high school students. To generate new leads, enhanced still images taken from the CCTV footage were released to the media and broadcast nationwide. The breakthrough came from a member of the public. A local woman recognized the 2 boys shown in the footage and contacted police. She told investigators that Robert Thompson and John Venables had both been absent from school on the day James disappeared. On February 18, 1993, 6 days after the murder, detectives arrived at the boys' homes. Thompson and Venables were taken into custody. Investigators were now confronting something few had anticipated. The primary suspects in the murder investigation were both 10 years old. During police interviews, the boys repeatedly denied involvement. They claimed they had not been near the shopping center. But as detectives confronted them with CCTV footage and witness statements, their accounts began to collapse. As the interviews continued, each boy started blaming the other for the abduction and assault. But investigators no longer needed a confession. They already had the forensic evidence. Scientists examining the boys' clothing and footwear discovered traces of blue paint matching the paint recovered from the railway embankment. More significantly, blood found on the boys' shoes was matched through DNA analysis to James Bulger. The forensic findings dismantled their denials. The interviews were over. Robert Thompson and John Venables were formally charged with murder. In November 1993, the trial opened at Preston Crown Court. By then, Robert Thompson and John Venables were both 11 years old, but they were not tried in a juvenile courtroom. Instead, the 2 boys were placed inside a traditional adult court. To allow them to see over the dock, specially raised seating had to be constructed inside the courtroom. The image became one of the most recognizable moments of the case. 2 children sitting elevated behind the rails of a high-security murder trial, surrounded by police officers, lawyers, and court officials. After a 3-week trial, the jury delivered its verdict on November 24, 1993. Both boys were found guilty of murder. Thompson and Venables were sentenced to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure, the juvenile equivalent of a life sentence. But almost immediately, the question of how long they should remain in custody became the center of a national legal and political battle. The trial judge initially recommended a minimum term of 8 years. The Lord Chief Justice later increased the tariff to 10. Public reaction, however, was intense. Following sustained media pressure and a nationwide petition campaign supported by James Bulger's family, the Home Secretary intervened directly and increased the minimum term again, this time to 15 years. While the public debate continued outside the courtroom, Thompson and Venables were transferred to separate secure children's units, where they underwent years of psychological assessment and rehabilitation. At the same time, a wider legal battle was unfolding behind the scenes. In 1997, the House of Lords ruled that the Home Secretary's political intervention in the sentencing process had been unlawful. 2 years later, the European Court of Human Rights issued another landmark decision, ruling that the boys had not received a fair trial. The court concluded that the highly public and intimidating atmosphere of an adult murder trial had been inappropriate for children of their age. Those rulings dramatically changed the future of the case. In 2001, parole officials reviewed both teenagers, now 18 years old, and concluded they no longer posed a threat to public safety. That June, Robert Thompson and John Venables were released on life license. To protect them from potential vigilante attacks, the British government implemented extraordinary security measures. Both teenagers were given entirely new identities, while a worldwide anonymity injunction made it a criminal offense to publicly reveal their new names or locations. Legally and publicly, the two boys who walked out of the New Strand shopping center in 1993 effectively ceased to exist. The decision to release the killers in 2001 remained deeply controversial. But in the years that followed, the lives of Robert Thompson and John Venables moved in very different directions. Since his release, Thompson has largely disappeared from public view. Living under a protected identity, he is reported to have successfully reintegrated into society and, according to official records, has never reoffended. Venables followed a very different path. In 2010, the anonymity protecting him was shattered after he was arrested and returned to prison. During the investigation, police discovered indecent images of children on his computer. After serving his sentence, Venables was released again in 2013. To preserve his protection, authorities issued him a second new identity. It did not last. In November 2017, Venables was recalled to prison for a second time after police uncovered more than 1,000 indecent images of children on his computer, along with material investigators described as a pedophile manual. He was later sentenced to 40 months in custody. Since then, Venables has repeatedly applied for parole. Each request has been rejected. In December 2023, the parole board again ruled that he continued to pose a risk to the public. He remains in prison. Throughout the decades of legal appeals, parole hearings, and public debate, James Bulger's family has remained at the center of the case. For more than 30 years, Denise Fergus and Ralph Bulger have continued campaigning for victims' rights while opposing Venables' release through public advocacy and parole proceedings. More than 3 decades later, the legal, ethical, and political debates surrounding the case still continue. But at the center of the story remains the same irreversible fact. On February 12, 1993, a 2-year-old boy was led away from a shopping center and never came home.